Monday mornings were always heavy, but that one felt like someone had placed a stone right on my chest. Aubrey swept into the office half an hour late, pumpkin spice latte in one hand, phone in the other. She wore oversized glasses with no prescription, the kind she thought made her look like an innovator. Her heels clacked across the polished floor, as if the whole building existed only to amplify her arrival. She dropped into a chair across from me and raised her voice just enough to make sure everyone within earshot could catch it. "Someone send the IT Barbie to the server room. The blinking lights will keep her busy." The words echoed like static. A burst of laughter followed, loud and eager. A few people covered their mouths. Others leaned back in their chairs and cackled openly. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. Instead, I offered a smile the kind only middle-aged women and cornered wolves know how to wear, tight-lipped and tired. It said, "I've survived worse than you," and I buried them quietly. By lunchtime, the office buzzed with Aubrey's antics. She strutted around with her phone out, taking selfies by the whiteboard, scribbling buzzwords she barely understood. I kept my head down, tapping keys, pretending the morning's insult had rolled off me like water. But beneath the surface, something shifted. That afternoon, I tried to log into the admin console. Access denied. My credentials, the same ones I had used for over a decade, had been revoked. At first, I thought it was an error, but a quick check confirmed otherwise. Permissions reassigned. Ownership shifted. Someone had cut me out. Not someone. Aubrey. She hadn't just called me Barbie. She'd already begun dismantling my authority. I sat back in my chair, letting the glow of the monitor reflect in my glasses. Anger was there, sharp and metallic, but I didn't let it spill. Instead, I opened my private drive, the one no one else knew existed, and started copying configurations. Every system state, every log, every change since last week went into a hidden archive. I screenshotted Slack threads, saved email chains, time-stamped everything. I didn't storm into Gareth's office. I didn't demand an explanation. Silence was my weapon. Patience my shield. If Aubrey wanted to play games, I would write the rules she never bothered to read. And by the end of that day, I already knew the first piece on the board had moved, and it wasn't hers. I'd been here long enough to measure my career not in promotions or plaques, but in outages averted. 20 years of midnight patches that kept payroll running, of duct tape fixes that stopped customer data from leaking into the dark, of sitting alone in the server room with a thermos of coffee while the city outside went to sleep. The executives got their bonuses. The managers collected awards. I just kept the machine alive. Walking through the office now, I barely recognized it. The walls were plastered with posters that shouted innovation, disruption, future first in bold neon colors. Every desk had a ring light. The air smelled less of burned circuits and more of pumpkin spice and expensive cologne. Aubrey's presence was everywhere. Selfies on Slack, hashtags painted onto whiteboards. Meanwhile, the old diagrams I'd sketched years ago were long erased, replaced with doodles about vision and slay mode. Gareth, her uncle and our CEO, had stood in a board meeting last week and called Aubrey the face of next-gen tech. He said my methods belonged to another era, like I was some relic waiting to be put in a museum. The room had applauded her. Not one person had looked at me. Later that day, Jonas Hale slipped into my cubicle. His voice lowered. "She started a private Slack channel. Ops reboot. You're not on it." His eyes were apologetic, as though he knew the weight of that exclusion. I thanked him, then returned to my screen. Let her build her little club. Let her rename servers and scribble pastel flowcharts, because I still had root access hidden in places she'd never think to look. Cron jobs that answered only to me. Legacy scripts tucked into directories no one bothered to document. The The bones of this company weren't in her slides. They were in the ghosts I'd stitched together. The fragile balance only I understood. So I stayed quiet. Let her think she'd locked me out. Let her imagine I was fading. Because sometimes the most dangerous power is the one no one notices until it's too late. The next week, Aubrey put on a show that would have impressed any theater crowd. She marched into the executive briefing with her pastel slides and acrylic nails, tossing out buzzwords like confetti, serverless future, zero trust pivot, legacy-free architecture, slay mode. Each phrase landed like gospel in a room full of people desperate to believe they were still ahead of the curve. I sat at the edge of the conference table, my notes open, my presence ignored. Gareth leaned forward with a gleam in his eyes, nodding at every half-baked metaphor his niece strung together. When she finished with a flourish, "It's not survival mode, it's slay mode," the executives broke into applause as if she had cured cancer. Gareth stood, clapping louder than the rest. "Aubrey will lead the infrastructure migration. She's our project lead." The words stung less than the silence that followed. Not a single glance my way, not even a perfunctory nod to the years I had carried their fragile systems. It wasn't just exclusion, it was erasure. That evening, as I gathered my things, I lingered by the glass walls of a side office. Gareth's voice carried through the half-shut door. He was on the phone with someone I couldn't see. No, of course she doesn't have depth. She's green. But it's optics. We need a young visionary for the IPO. Investors don't want to see duct tape. They want to see sparkle. I stood frozen, listening. It wasn't about competence. It wasn't about stability. It was about parading Aubrey as a symbol. A glossy sticker to paste over a system they didn't want to admit was held together by my sleepless nights. For the first time, I understood the rot wasn't just in her vanity, it was in the foundation of the leadership itself. They didn't want the truth. They wanted a performance. So I stopped documenting only technical errors. I began archiving the meetings, the decisions, the Slack threads where Gareth praised her buzzwords and dismissed real risks. If they wanted optics, I'd give them optics, but in black and white with signatures attached. And with every file I saved, the weight of silence grew sharper, heavier, more deliberate. Aubrey wasted no time pressing her advantage. Within days, I found myself cut off from every mailing list I had curated for years. The project updates that once relied on my oversight now bypassed me entirely. Shared drives I had organized like a librarian's catalog returned error messages when I tried to open them. My name vanished from calendar invites I had set up myself, and in a move that would have been laughable if it weren't so dangerous, she began assigning critical infrastructure tasks to interns who couldn't tell a load balancer from a latte machine. I didn't complain. I didn't protest. I simply nodded in meetings, my polite smile betraying nothing. Outwardly, I looked like someone resigned to irrelevance, but in truth, I was working harder than ever. At home, my external drives hummed as I copied every directory, every document. I maintained shadow versions of each configuration, tucked away where no one could touch them. Slack threads mocking me as Barbie were screen captured and archived with timestamps. Even the emojis they added the cry-laugh faces. The champagne glasses became exhibits for a future I knew was coming. One evening, Jonas pulled me aside in the hallway. "Celeste, you don't have to put yourself through this. Just quit. Walk away. Find another firm that will actually value you." His voice was soft, but the pity stung more than Aubrey's insults. I shook my head. I don't quit games when I already know the ending. He looked at me with something like fear, like he wasn't sure if I was stubborn or ruthless. Maybe I was both. Aubrey paraded through the office, certain she had stripped me of power. She saw only empty chairs where my name used to be. What she couldn't see were the maps I was building in silence diagrams of every dependency she ignored, every fragile connection she pretended didn't matter. Because power doesn't vanish when someone locks you out of a folder. Sometimes it sharpens in the shadows, waiting. And I was already writing the blueprint for her collapse. By then, my archives had grown heavy. Every drive backed up, every Slack insult frozen in time. I had enough to bury her in paperwork if I wanted, but timing mattered. Aubrey thrived on attention, and I needed her to trip in the spotlight, not the shadows. So I left her a gift. In the shared drive, tucked neatly between HR policies and old vendor contracts, I uploaded a beige, boring PDF legacy infrastructure final, PDF, 30 pages of diagrams, notes, and server maps that looked convincing enough to pass as authentic. And in many ways, it was except for what I intentionally left out. The hidden compliance script that lived at the heart of the system, the one piece of code that would never allow a deployment without my signature, was nowhere on those pages. To the untrained eye, it looked like a complete Rosetta Stone. To me, it was a hollow skeleton waiting to collapse. It didn't take long. By the next morning, I saw her in the glass-walled conference room with markers in hand, scribbling my diagrams onto the whiteboard like she had discovered buried treasure. She added pastel hearts around nodes, renamed modules with hashtags, and explained to her audience of interns how she had decoded the legacy labyrinth. Her pride radiated through the glass. Executives walked by, impressed, nodding at her clarity. Not one of them realized they were watching her build an empire on quicksand. From my desk, I kept my expression neutral. I let her wave the binder around like it was scripture. I let her present my omissions as revelations. I let her believe she had outmaneuvered me. Because sometimes, the smartest move isn't to strike first. It's to hand your opponent the rope, watch them loop it around their own neck, and smile politely while they pull it tight. And by the end of that week, Aubrey had already woven her entire migration plan around the trap I'd set, convinced she'd finally proven her worth. By Friday, Aubrey had transformed the break room into a stage set. Streamers hung from the ceiling. A cardboard cutout of Steve Jobs leaned against the counter, and trays of cupcakes with orange icing shaped like flames lined the table. She strutted in wearing a sequined blazer that glittered under the fluorescent lights, announcing the beginning of Glow Up 2025. The crowd clapped and cheered as if she'd already saved the company. She raised a plastic flute of cheap champagne and toasted to burning down the prehistoric systems that had chained us for too long. I didn't have to guess who those words were aimed at. Balloons bobbed against the ceiling tiles as Aubrey gave her speech. All pastel promises and jargon. No more duct tape fixes. No more dinosaur code. Monday is the dawn of a new era. The interns applauded like disciples. And then one of them, a kid barely old enough to rent a car, raised his hand nervously. His voice cracked as he asked, "Are you sure that binder is, current? Some of the diagrams look kind of old." The room went still for a moment. Aubrey's smile hardened. She laughed too loudly and snapped, "Don't question what you don't understand. Stick to fetching lattes and leave infrastructure to the grown-ups." The interns chuckled weakly, and the boy sank into his chair, red-faced. Aubrey twirled her marker like a queen dismissing a subject, doubling down on the plan that was already doomed. I watched from the corner, silent. I had planted that seed of doubt days earlier, a stray comment about how fast things can change, how maps grow stale overnight. Aubrey could have paused, reconsidered, even asked me. Instead, she humiliated the one person brave enough to notice. That night, while she posted selfies from her party, I sat in the quiet hum of the server room and finalized my own script. A single compliance flag, buried deep, requiring my signature before any deployment could go live. I saved screenshots, exported Slack threads, and slipped everything into the black binder that would one day speak louder than I ever needed to. And as the office celebrated flames, I was already setting the fuse. Monday morning arrived with the weight of a storm. The boardroom was packed wall-to-wall, executives in press suits, interns balancing muffins on paper plates, HR with clipboards, even a freelance videographer setting up his tripod in the back. Gareth sat at the front, grinning as though this was the IPO itself. Aubrey, in a blazer so pink it nearly hummed, strutted to the podium with her laptop clutched like a trophy. "Today," she declared, "we bury the old and usher in the new." She winked toward Gareth, who beamed with pride. Then, with a flourish, she clicked the glowing button labeled Deploy Glow Stack. The projector screen blinked. Lines of code flickered, then froze. A single message spread across the screen in bold. Clinical text, deployment blocked. Architecture non-compliant. Override required. The silence that followed was deafening. A few nervous chuckles floated, quickly dying out. Aubrey clicked again, harder this time, as if force could bend logic. The same message stared back. "It's just a caching hiccup," she stammered, her voice pitched higher. Legacy ghosts in the system. Totally normal. Murmurs rippled through the room. Someone coughed. HR shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. From the corner, Marcus Levin leaned over his laptop. Squinting, "Who's the compliance admin?" he muttered. The projector, as if summoned, displayed the answer at the bottom of the error log. Override required Whitmore. Celeste. Every head turned. I sat at the back with my coffee, the steam curling into my face. I took a slow sip, unhurried. Aubrey's smile faltered. "That's outdated," she insisted, her voice wobbling. "We phased her out months ago. The projector didn't care, neither did the logs." The message pulsed again, stark and merciless, non-compliant. Override required. I set my cup down softly, the porcelain clink echoing like a gavel. Aubrey clicked once more, desperation bleeding through her manicured nails, but the system held firm. The glitter in her blazer couldn't mask the cracks forming in her composure, and as whispers thickened into silence, I knew the unraveling had only just begun. The silence in the boardroom was broken only by the squeak of the door. Legal walked in, Serena Cho at the front with her laptop already open, Marcus Levin close behind. Gareth straightened in his seat, his earlier pride replaced with a frown as Serena connected to the projector. The first file appeared on the screen, Slack threads pulled from Aubrey's private channel. Her words scrolled in stark black and white. "Barbie doesn't even know Git. She's dead weight. We'll push forward without her." A ripple of discomfort passed through the room. Some executives shifted in their chairs. Others avoided looking at me altogether. Aubrey's face drained of color. She stammered. "Those were jokes. Banter. It's not relevant." Serena raised a hand, calm but cutting. "These were written 2 weeks ago, while you attempted to override compliance policy." I stood slowly, pulling the black binder from my bag. It was heavy with months of evidence screenshots, emails, logs, calendar invites that never reached me, diagrams altered without approval. I set it on the table and opened it, pages whispering like blades, timelines in neat rows, system states before and after each unauthorized change, Slack insults stamped with dates and names. The room leaned in. Jonas, standing by the wall, caught my eye. His brows lifted slightly, as if only now realizing I hadn't been silent at all. I had been recording everything. Aubrey's voice cracked. This was supposed to be my launch. My chance to prove her words collapsed under the weight of the evidence in front of her. Every insult, every dismissal, every reckless shortcut was etched in paper and ink. Undeniable. Serena closed her laptop, leaving the Slack thread frozen on the projector. The words mocked Aubrey from above like a verdict carved in stone. Gareth shifted, his hand covering his mouth, but no defense came. Aubrey trembled at the podium, clutching her sequined blazer as if fabric could shield her from what was unfolding. And in that moment, the shine she had wrapped herself in began to fall away, thread by thread, leaving only the mess she had created for everyone to see. Gareth finally found his voice, though it came out tighter than usual. Let's not overreact. This is just optics. We needed boldness, and Aubrey brought it. Investors don't care about technical hiccups. They care about vision. Serena didn't blink. This isn't a hiccup. It's a compliance violation. If this goes public, regulators will levy fines that make your IPO dream look like smoke. Governance requires signatures, documentation, oversight. None of that happened under her lead. The air in the room thickened. Gareth tried again, his tone rising. She's learning. I leaned forward, my voice steady. I wasn't asked. I was erased. A hush followed. I slid the black binder across the table, its weight deliberate. Gareth hesitated before pulling it closer. He opened it to page after page of screenshots, emails, logs, every detail stamped with time and date. His jaw tightened as he flipped further, the paper cutting into his fingers as reality sliced through his excuses. This can't... His voice faltered. He closed the binder and exhaled slowly, his eyes avoiding mine. She's family. Serena's reply was quiet, precise. She's liability. The words hung like a gavel strike. HR moved silently, standing behind Aubrey. Her sequined blazer had lost its shine, her hands shaking as she clutched the laptop she no longer dared to open. Gareth looked at her, then at me, and finally dropped his gaze to the table. Aubrey Vance, Serena said, her tone formal now. Your access is revoked, effective immediately. HR will escort you. Legal will follow with next steps. Aubrey's lips parted, but no sound came. The room remained frozen as she stood slowly, peeled the badge from her blazer, and set it down. HR guided her to the door. The projector, still frozen on her mocking Slack message, finally dimmed to black. The silence left behind was heavier than any applause I'd ever heard, and as the glass door closed behind her, I knew the reckoning wasn't just hers, it was Gareth's too. The boardroom emptied slowly, like air leaking from a balloon. Executives murmured half-hearted excuses, clutching their phones as if urgent emails had suddenly materialized. Gareth lingered, shoulders slumped. The confidence he carried into every meeting stripped away. He finally looked at me, the weight of silence pressing on his words. Celeste, he said, his voice cautious. This company needs stability. We can't afford another spectacle. If you were willing to step into a leadership role, CTO, perhaps it would help repair the optics. I folded my hands, steady. I don't want titles. Gareth, I want truth in the system. Titles never kept the servers running. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Maybe he couldn't. Jonas approached me as the others drifted out, his hand extended. You played the long game, he said, a hint of awe in his voice. I shook his hand firmly. It was never a game. It was survival. And I knew exactly how it would end. I left the boardroom and walked the quiet corridor, the muffled hum of servers rising from the floor below. Passing the glass wall of the server room, I paused, Rows of machines blinked steadily, their lights rhythmically pulsing like a heartbeat. That room had been my cathedral, the place where every patch, every sleepless night, had kept the company alive. Not Gareth's speeches, not Aubrey's glitter, just the hum of systems and the patience to understand them. I sipped the coffee I'd been carrying all morning. It was cold now, bitter, but it grounded me. The chaos, the laughter, the cruelty, all of it faded into background noise. What remained was calm, steady, precise. Because revenge was never about volume. It wasn't loud applause or dramatic exits. It was one move, a compliance flag, a binder, a patient silence that let arrogance write its own obituary. I turned away from the servers and walked back to my desk, the familiar chair waiting. Outside, the city pulsed with noise and speed. Inside, the machine hummed, alive and stable, because I had chosen not to shout, but to wait. And waiting had been enough.